Welcome to the Chris Heimerdinger Channel. Today I have an interview with Max Jackson, who is a police officer with the state of Utah and happens to have some connections to some critical cases and current events that are happening in the state of Utah that have been particularly painful for Latter-day Saints and for the Utah and American community in general, which is the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which took place on the Utah Valley campus a couple of weeks ago. And also, we've had the terrible incident that occurred in Michigan, where a shooter went into an LDS chapel in Grand Blanc, Michigan, and there were 4 deaths and a number of injuries that came out of that shooting, as well as the torching of the entire chapel. I needed to find someone that I could interview, and I had a friend in Max who has direct connections with not only police matters in general, but also and tell me if I'm incorrect on this, Max, he knows personally, because he was once serving as a sheriff in southern Utah, he has one-layer connections with law enforcement officers who have been involved in the arrest of Tyler Robinson, who is the alleged assassin of Charlie Kirk, as well as one layer of connections having personally known Tyler Robinson's family, the father, the grandfather, and even to some extent, the great-grandfather of that family. Is that all correct?
Yes.
Well, Max, tell us a little bit more about your career and your experience as a law enforcement official in Utah.
I began my career in 1980 and retired full-time in 2019. I served 2 terms as a sheriff in southern Utah, one of the counties down there, and 25 years as a police chief of a small city here in northern Utah. I currently work for a university police department and a municipal city police department as a court security officer and do event security for the university.
The reason I wanted to talk to you, I think it's because, number one, your association with some of the figureheads who are involved in the Charlie Kirk case, but also it's just gotten a little crazy out there with regard to the conspiracy theories surrounding the Charlie Kirk assassination. And so I thought it might be nice to get a faithful member of the church who is also a police officer, understands the bureaucracies of how you charge someone with something like capital murder and the process, the bureaucracy of how that works. I found it myself a little bothersome that there are so many conspiracy theories that have erupted. I'm trying to think of another case since the internet became such an integral part of everybody's lives where we have had a political assassination or a killing that was this front and center. And I wonder what your thoughts are as to why a case. I remember when I first approached you to possibly talk about this, and I asked you, have you heard all of the conspiracies surrounding the Charlie Kirk assassination? And your response was, I think they got the guy dead to rights. That was a little bit jarring simply because I had immersed myself in a lot of the conspiracy theories that were surrounding it. What made you, I guess, confident that there's a pretty good case?
Obviously, social media makes it interesting in that everybody wants answers and they want them now. And the folks that are out there putting the investigation together, they got to walk a fine line in that the public has a right to know, but do they give out too much evidence, too much information to the point that they can't impanel an impartial jury? And so prosecuting attorneys have to walk that fine line. And I believe when we started talking about, I don't personally follow a lot of the conspiracy theories. I just, as a longtime investigator myself, I just concern myself with the information that was available. And probably the most telling one would be the probable cause affidavit that was issued by the Attorney General's office in making the application for his arrest warrant.
Right. And that is available online, and I can put a link to that document in the show notes. But that probable affidavit of probable cause against Tyler Robinson clearly indicates that the police have a ton of evidence which has not been made public. Now, like I say, there's a lot of people throwing out conspiracy theories, talking heads like Candace Owens, another one named Ian Carroll, and they're getting a lot of views and making a lot of bank with just simply dredging this up as a conspiracy theory. Now, the last thing that I want to do is say that these people have ulterior motives. I don't think they do. I think Candace Owens in particular is very sincere. She's grieving. Charlie Kirk was a personal friend of hers. She wants answers. And she also simply has sort of a persona of just being like a dog who gets a hold of a bone and she's just not going to let it go. And as a result, there have been a number of conspiracy theories that have started to appear. But I think what's important here is we all remember this day so well. We remember the fact when Charlie Kirk was shot, many of us actually endured seeing that actual video because we wanted to feel a sense of hope. We were hoping we would see something in the video which led us to believe that Charlie Kirk might be all right, that the bullet wasn't in the dead on in the neck, and that he might survive. The video itself pretty much tamped that down. And after that, I think most of us were just waiting for the news that he had passed away. But in the wake of all of that, we started to I immediately went to my daughter's wedding in Boise right after the shooting took place and attended her temple wedding. But what happened in the hours after I left, I think they started releasing the first footage of the shooter wearing sunglasses and a hat and a t-shirt walking through campus. My impression, and tell me if I'm wrong, Max, is that the police only released enough information as what they thought would be helpful in order to find and identify the killer. That was they only released as much information as they felt would be helpful in that cause.
That's correct. You had a lot of other portions of the investigation taking place as well. I do know that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms were in the small town in southern Utah where that rifle was initially purchased the day after the shooting. So they were basically hot on the trail.
Now, hang on a second. Where the rifle was purchased, I thought this was an heirloom rifle that had been handed down from the World War I era. It was actually a foreign-made rifle. Is that not true?
No. So Mauser actions, they're the bolt action found on World War. Generally, the Mauser 98 action is a very strong, smooth action, and that's just the bolt and the chamber. They became very popular to build custom-made rifles with American calibers during the.
So you're saying that a part of the rifle is old, dates back to World War I, and a lot of the rifle is modern?
Yes, just the fact that they said it was a Mauser 98 in caliber 30-06, that to me tells me that it's a custom-made rifle, and I believe Mr. Robinson indicated in the text that it was unique. It isn't the fact that it's a custom-made rifle using the old German style Mauser style action with a American-made 30-06 caliber barrel screwed onto it. And generally, when that happens, a sporterized stock goes on. I don't know for a fact if this rifle had one, but and I know a lot of the conspiracy theorists are saying, well, there's no serial number on those old German rifles, and that may be true, but the barrel that was screwed onto it to build the custom rifle would have had a serial number stamped on it. And so ATF were tracking that down and knew very early on.
Oh, so you're telling me that it wasn't necessarily just the fact that the family turned in the alleged shooter. The police were onto this guy because there was a serial number that could be traced to at least parts of the rifle.
That's my understanding.
So there was an arrest was pending either way.
I don't know what information was gained first, but I do know that that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms knew very quickly the origin of the rifle itself.
With that, let me get a little bit of background. You said you know the Robinson family, or you know the father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. Tell me a little bit about how you know them and how well you know them.
Well, the Robinson family, they're a very prominent family in parts of southern Utah. Their ancestor was one of the original founders or settlers in the southern Utah region. His great-grandfather served in county government the same time I was the sheriff. And
where were you serving as sheriff?
I was in Kane County.
Kane County. Those of us who don't know southern Utah as well as we should, of course, we know Washington County because that's where St. George is, right?
Right. Kane County's county seat is Kanab.
Kanab. Okay. So you're right next door. So the Robinson family had pioneer ancestry.
Absolutely did. Some of the one of the first original settlers down there.
Well, when this whole case started to unfold, I felt a bit embarrassed that this had taken place at Utah Valley University, and I'm still sensitive to the fact that Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah, which is a city where I used to live, now has the eternal reputation of being the city where this terrible assassination took place. And of course, Utah County is probably per capita one of the thickest population ratios for Latter-day Saints in the whole country. So the whole thing has been very uncomfortable for me. I didn't want that stain. I didn't want that reputation, but unfortunately, it appears that that is now unavoidable. And the sentiment or the rumor is that Tyler Robinson was not an active member of the church. What do you know about other members? The father, grandfather, great-grandfather, were they active members of the church?
His great-grandfather was, for sure.
And you knew him. How old were you? You must have been a toddler.
I was a fairly young sheriff at the time, in my early 30s.
You knew him how? What was your association?
He lived in the same state, of course, and was the county assessor at the same time I was the sheriff.
And how did you know the grandfather who is the owner of the rifle? Apparently the original owner of the rifle?
Just, he's a little older, but we kind of grew up and passed one another here and there. He dated a girl from Kanab, and he was a very good drag car driver.
A drag car racer.
Yeah, he could speed shift like nobody I ever saw.
We're talking about Tyler Robinson's grandfather. This is a family with a lot of history and culture that is directly connected to southern Utah, and the Kanab area especially.
Yeah.
But the father eventually wound up in Washington, Utah, was it? Or the St. George area?
That's my understanding.
Did you know the father, the Tyler Robinson's direct father?
He could have gone to possibly attended elementary school in Kanab at the same time my kids were there, but he was so young I wouldn't have remembered him.
Okay, so you don't know the father, you just know the grandfather and the great-grandfather.
And I actually knew the great-great-grandfather.
The great-great-grandfather. Man, you go back. Are your roots in southern Utah as well?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. So you're pioneer stock as well.
My ancestors actually lived the United Order in Orderville, which was, I believe, the only system in the church where the United Order was attempted, and it actually was a
Functioned.
success.
Yeah, I remember that as well. Now, you also know some of the officers or authorities who were involved in the arrest of Tyler Robinson?
No, I'm not.
You're not directly connected that way.
No.
You probably know people who know people. Like you mentioned when we first talked that there was somebody that you had spoken with on about this case from the
Yes,
Kanab Police Department.
somewhere down there. Yeah.
What bothers me are some of the controversies that have sprung up. Some of them seem so genuinely they create genuine mystery. They create genuine doubt, which I'm sure is something that the defense team of Tyler Robinson is trying to latch a hold of. They'd probably be very interested in the podcast episodes of people like Ian Carroll or Candace Owens or others who are trying to, man, it brings back a whole lot of memories and a lot of deja vu regarding the John F. Kennedy assassination. They're talking about magic bullets, how it couldn't have been this person, how there had to be a second shooter, how there was this, how there was that. However, my advice, and this is directly from you, would be to read that document. What do you call it again?
It's a probable cause affidavit. Basically, probable cause is a legal standard, whereas, and it's the same standard that the judge, if this goes to a preliminary hearing, it's the same standard that the judge will use to determine if it should be bound over for trial. Probable cause is basically specific and articulable facts that lead one to believe that a crime has been committed and that the person charged is the person that committed that crime. It's the same standard that grand juries consider when a grand jury is impaneled, evidence is given to them. Once it hits that probable cause standard, which is a fairly low legal standard, like to convict takes a beyond reasonable doubt.
Right.
Probable cause standard is much lower. So it takes 95% to convict. Probable cause standard is like 35.
It's just enough to bring charges.
Correct. And it's the same standard that when officers go to a judge with a affidavit of probable cause for a search warrant, say, the judge will say this has enough probable cause that I will issue a search warrant for a residence. And the same is true for an arrest warrant. So I don't think you're going to see too much more information put on with a preliminary hearing as what's contained in that original probable cause affidavit to seek the arrest warrant. I think they'll withhold the rest of the information till time for trial. Of course, the defense counsel will have, through the discovery process, all the evidence that the state plans to use to convict Mr. Robinson. They will have that through the discovery process.
Well, the best thing I think I gained by reading that probable cause document was it reveals quite clearly that the police have a ton of evidence that they have not released to the public. And I've even gone through this with my own son as we discussed the controversy, as many families in America are doing and across the world maybe. He's saying, why don't they release things like the autopsy report? Why don't they come forward and give the public everything? Tell me just what the legal philosophy is that would say, no, you don't release all of this stuff to the general public?
The main goal here is to make sure Mr. Robinson gets a fair trial. He's innocent until he's proven guilty. And if you start letting the public have all of the evidence and information available, it's going to be hard to impanel a fair and impartial jury to hear the matter.
Because all of the news has already been spread up and down the state and up and down the potential jury pool, to where you can't get a jury that hasn't already watched all of the Candace Owens episodes, watched all of the Ian Carroll episodes, and the episodes of everyone else who seemingly are genuinely convinced that there's a conspiracy going on.
I'm sure that the jury list is going to be massive. It's probably going to take a few days to impanel a jury through the voir dire process. They get the prosecution and the defense get to decide who stays, who goes. It's quite a process, but the main thing is, in small jurisdictions where I had a major case. In fact, I was on a Netflix documentary called Hell Camp Teen Nightmare, where
I remember that case.
Youth survival program for troubled youth started up, and kids were injured, and one died, and
sunstroke,
so
right?
much media attention. The judge was convinced that he couldn't get a fair trial down in the small populated area of Kane County, that he transferred the venue of the trial up to Salt Lake City.
And we hear about that all the time, just with trials associated with politicians, that they often, back east, you have certain districts which are so pro-Democrat, and you have other districts, I'm sure, in other areas that are so pro-conservative or pro-Republican. It's much more difficult to get a fair and impartial jury.
Yes, and that's the goal of a prosecutor. Give out, the probable cause statement is public knowledge. And that's how you know about arrests, when the paper talks about somebody being arrested, their name, what they allegedly did, because they go to the jails, and because those probable cause affidavits are available, they take the information off that to write the story in the say the paper or on the news. And that's because it's public knowledge.
Well, I know that, just looking at the deer on the back wall, you have also a lot of knowledge of guns and ballistics, being a police officer. One of the primary conspiracies that are floated right now, that are just surrounding this case, is the fact that a 30-06 shell should have been powerful enough to go through the body, should have produced an exit wound. And yet all indications are, now we don't have the autopsy report yet. And I would assume it won't even become public until it actually comes out in trial. But all reports are that there was no exit wound. Explain how is that unusual?
It can be, but there's really not enough information. The 30-06 is probably the most versatile big game caliber out there. And one of the reasons it's versatile is because you can shoot a myriad of loads in it, which would be powder charges, bullet weights, and construction, and
a different variety of shell.
So barrel length of the rifle, we don't know that. That plays a big part in velocity.
Based on what you know about the 30-06 rifle, why didn't it have an exit wound?
I don't have enough information to draw on that. I can conjecture. Some of your lighter bullets have a fairly thin copper jacket that kind of covers a lead core. In more recent years, there's a process out there called bonded core bullets, where they've found a way to solder the lead core to the copper jacket that it's sitting in, so it hangs together like one piece of material. It will expand and stay together and penetrate farther. Some of your cheaper rounds, the jacket a lot of times can separate from the core, and that makes it lose weight, which makes it lose inertia, which makes it lose the ability to penetrate. I have seen that happen in deer and elk neck shots within 30 yards that didn't get an exit wound.
And this at a distance reputedly of 200 yards.
You don't know the velocity of the bullet when it hit him. You do not know the type of bullet that was used, and if it was a type that would separate from the core and get less penetration. Everything's conjecture at this point. I think it'll all be brought out eventually, but I have seen stranger things happen with big game animals. As a side note, with law enforcement, for a long time, law enforcement got away from the 9mm. They went to the 40, the 45 ACP. And if you notice that most law enforcement agencies are back to the 9mm. And the reason they're back to the 9mm is because of bonded core hollow point bullets. They controlled expansion, deeper penetration. The bullets they weigh less, they cost less, and you can pack more in your magazine.
Police, when they shoot a suspect, they're not looking for the bullet to shatter, fly apart. They're looking for penetration, though.
Penetration to the point that it doesn't over penetrate, but will disrupt as much bone and tissue and circulation as possible. If you watch the Charlie Kirk assassination in slow motion, and if you haven't, I don't advise you do, because it's not pretty to look at. But you notice in slow motion as he was struck, his body rippled. That is hydrostatic shock. With rifles, they have the ability, because of the velocity they carry, to kill with hydrostatic shock. What I mean is your body is 70% water. So when something hits it fast enough, that water will ripple, and it'll destroy vital organs and everything else. Handgun ammunition does not go fast enough to create that kind of hydrostatic shock. And so it relies on expansion and maximum penetration, but over penetration to get those stops. So the reason they've gone back to the 9mm is with these new bonded core bullets, they're able to get as many one-shot stops as they were using the bigger, heavier rounds.
What you're saying is essentially that it's not necessarily surprising at all that the bullet did not have an exit wound. A lot of factors could go that would make that totally explicable.
Yes, and I think that'll all be borne out once we find out the ballistics, the type of bullets, the distances, the velocity, and there's just so many.
The other conspiracy theory, I mean, it's crazy. You watch some of these and they have these down to the millimeter measurements of how, based on where they say Tyler Robinson was positioned, the bullet should have penetrated, and how it proves that Tyler Robinson was innocent. All of these things, how he couldn't have been on the Losi building. He had to have been on another building on campus in order for it to have been a fatal shot. I just think it's crazy. I don't know what it says about us as a people that, number one, the grief and the anger, which would have been associated with the assassination, serves to create an environment or an atmosphere where people yearn for conspiracy theories. I do remember, though, having this human emotion. I remember being so anxious right after the assassination. I hope they catch this guy. And then after I heard that they did catch the guy, I don't know. I just had a feeling of disappointment. There was a feeling of, it's not enough. It's not enough. I'm not quite sure why I had that human reaction, but I think that that reaction might explain why so many people want to believe there's more to it than just Tyler Robinson and the fact that he was able to carry off as a single shooter this assassination. They want to believe there were governments involved. They want to believe that Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA somehow had people in the organization who were corrupt and helped to carry this out. I mean, there's crazy stuff right now that's being generated. And I guess what you're saying is we just have to hope that when the evidence is actually released to the public, a lot of these conspiracy theories will just fizzle out and dry up and go away.
First of all, that's a large assumption to make on these so-called expert ballisticians, in that the only thing they know about the rifle is the caliber itself. You don't know the powder charge. You don't know the barrel length. You don't know the type of bullet or the bullet weight. All these play into the factor of is it going to penetrate or not? Is it going to exit or not? It's a call they just can't make based on the caliber itself.
Well, I know that Charlie Kirk in general had a habit that when he was in listening mode, he would sort of put forward his chin. It allowed for a lot of spine to get in the way of a bullet. And so to you, it's not really necessarily a surprise at all that the bullet did not penetrate.
No, not at this juncture.
I'm sure you've dealt with murder cases where at least the physics were similar.
Yes, and murder, suicide. I've investigated a number of both, and then my experience in the field with big game animals. I'm pretty familiar with how kind of it all works.
Well, you showed me a shell when I was at your house. You showed me a shell that you said you had shot in, I don't know, it might have been the deer that's on the wall there, but it was at least a deer. And you said you were about 30, 40, maybe 80, I can't remember the number, you'll have to correct me, yards away. And that bullet went into the neck and it did not have an exit wound.
That's correct. It's found under the skin. And that's another thing. Skin is very elastic. And if a bullet is dumped enough energy on the target as it penetrates the bone and tissue, as it hits the skin on the other side, a lot of times rather than exit, that skin is very elastic and it will stretch. And then, so often you'll find a round just sitting underneath the skin on the far side of the animal.
Well, I doubt that we've even scratched the surface of all the different conspiracy theories that are going on right now. But I guess it's just in Utah, we've never had in this culture a case perhaps that was so public. I mean, with the same kind of assassin and lone guy, Butler, Pennsylvania, or Daley Plaza kind of a scenario where there was a sniper and there was an assassination. Utah hasn't experienced that at all. In fact, America hasn't experienced it for a long time. I do know there are still controversies that are surrounding the assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania. People don't understand why this young kid had no social media footprint. They don't understand why the police took the silverware from his house. Have you heard all of these things? With the Crooks character who was shot on the roof before he could get off another round at the president, or after he was already buried by his security teams at that time.
And you just brought something else up that made me think as well, how things have evolved. Like I said, I've been in law enforcement for the past 45 years. I started back in 1980. Back in 1980, it wasn't uncommon to get a conviction based on eyewitness or expert witness testimony alone, maybe some photographs, maybe if you're lucky, some fingerprints. And it was not uncommon to get full-blown convictions off of that type of evidence. But with the advent of crime shows like CSI and forensics files, for instance, where cases are being made by all this forensic evidence, and juries now almost expect a voluminous amount of that kind of evidence in order to convict, and they're putting less and less reliability into so-called eyewitness or expert testimony. They like the forensics part of it, and so I think you're going to see quite a bit of that in this case.
Well, yeah, the public demands it. The jury demands it. The one situation where I found the controversy at least was curious. Apparently, there is one or two photographs, or maybe it's a small piece of video that shows a shooter on the roof just before the shot was fired. And that eyewitness who took that footage, he described the man that he saw as being dressed differently than Tyler Robinson. He saw him wearing fatigues and a mask, a much more professional, military-looking kind of a shooter. Now, if I was to see a shooter or a rifleman on a roof at a public event like this, my first thought would be that guy's on Charlie Kirk's team. He's an anti-sniper. He's somebody who's protecting Charlie Kirk. An individual like that might indeed be dressed in fatigues and other very professional gear. This man, I think, at least according to Candace Owens, describes the rifle being different, describes the physical characteristics of the person in that photograph being different. This is where I guess we're getting into what you're talking about, where eyewitnesses are not quite as cut and dried, reliable, slam dunk as it used to be with a conviction.
Exactly. So how these things work, like I said, I've worked for 4 university police departments and have conducted a number of VIP and dignitary protection details while they were on campus. And when they bring their own protection team with them, it is directly or around them. They don't send people out into the crowds. They don't put people on roofs for overwatch or
well, you would think after Butler, Pennsylvania, they would check out the roofs.
Well, that's a different deal. The Secret Service should have done all that there at Butler. But say I'm just talking about when a visiting dignitary comes to one of the campuses I've worked for, and they bring their own detail. They are just around them, their immediate surrounding area. The area farther out and the overwatch details, the drone operations, whatever we decide to do is done by law enforcement. Now, not all law enforcement is adept at dignitary protection, though more and more are being trained in that arena.
Well, you would think after these events.
I think you're going to see more and more of it. I know at the university I currently work at, we don't host those kinds of deals inside or outside. They're all inside, where they can be areas can be swept. Crowd like that, we'd have had 15 officers, plus an overwatch, plus a drone, if it had been outside.
If you were on the university staff, that would have been your natural response to a visiting dignitary like Charlie Kirk. You would have had a drone in the air?
Oh, absolutely.
So you feel that somebody was, they were they weren't on the job. They didn't necessarily cover this as best as it should have been covered. See, that just feeds conspiracy theories.
So I'm
People
not
saying,
going to cast aspersions because all I can tell you is what we would have done on our campuses.
yeah, well, it does make people think if that's what's normally done, and that's, you haven't said that, but if that would be standard behavior, that would feed conspiracies because people are wondering somebody passed along an order that they should go light and that they should not put a drone in the air, that they should not check rooftops. That's generally the way this would be information that could feed conspiracy theories. What is your conclusion about I guess how this thing is going to play out? I mean, nobody can really predict that, but in your experience, how will this case play out?
I think the defense, once they get all the discovery material available to them, see what they're up against, I think they're going to make a large play to maybe take the death penalty off the table in exchange for a plea. That's just my experience. I don't know for sure that's what they'll do, but I think if the evidence is voluminous, the witnesses are unimpeachable, and they'll be able to find all this out once they have the preliminary hearing. A lot of one of the advantage to the defense in Utah, where we don't have a grand jury system and have preliminary hearings, it affords the defense to see at least in part what's on the table as far as how good are the witnesses, what are they going to say.
They get to see all of the physical evidence.
They'll have access to it. Now, not all of it's going to be put on at the preliminary hearing. It'll be reserved for trial, but they'll have all of the available evidence that will be used. And if they think it's insurmountable, that's what they're going to try to take, maybe cut a deal and take the death penalty off the table, do life without parole, in my experience.
But if it's slam dunk, then the death penalty stays on the table.
The end game is going to be up to the prosecutor to decide where it goes. They do take victims' families into consideration as well. They consult with them. What are their wishes? Even though it doesn't mean the whole case, because the crime was committed against the whole state of Utah.
Right.
So the state's attorney has the ultimate say-so whether he proceeds with the death penalty trial, or if he wants to temper justice with a little mercy and do life without parole.
Which I think would be more horrible than the death penalty, but that's just me personally.
If it were me too, I'd feel the same way.
Yeah, I don't know. But people who don't believe there is an afterlife, they'll cling to life. They want to breathe the last breath that they possibly can.
I used to be a huge death penalty proponent. Again, like that visceral feeling you felt right off the bat,
You want justice, right?
I took a college class, and in it, I had to do a paper advocating for the death penalty and opposing it. And so I passionately wrote and ascribed to both sides in the two different papers. And in doing the research for the anti-death penalty, when my feelings about it were tempered. I mean, usually by the time it happens, it's 20 years down the road. It costs tons and tons of money to keep them on death row, and all the appeals and everything else that goes with it. And at the end of the day, if they're locked up and incapacitated, they're no longer a threat to the community. And if there's some good they can do while they're here, because one way or the other, people people on death row, they leave the prison feet first, whether they die of not natural causes or carried out because of an execution. Whether they're able to maybe do some good while they're in there. I know this is going to come as an interesting fact, but the Utah State Prison's name extraction program for the church genealogical and family history projects is the biggest name extraction operation in the world.
You mean inmates are doing the genealogical work?
They're doing name extractions.
That is interesting.
In fact, one of the infamous now Ogden rapists who's been told he'll never get out is the one that actually heads it up.
He's in prison, and yet he's making more strides forward in the genealogy and the temple work of the church. More than a lot of people, probably most people who are not in prison. Well, I guess that's a way that somebody can pay their debt to society, or pay their debt in a theological way.
When reality finally sinks in and see what's taken place, what great the cost, the suffering so many people, that comes to a realization and they want to change, they can do it to a degree.
Well, I'm sure you've had every experience in the book as far as people who were absolutely remorseless and people that you, at least on a personal level, even if on a legal level, you can't get them released from prison. You just meet with the person, you talk with the person, you know the person, and you feel there is genuine penance. We can change tack a little bit. I want to talk about the shooting in Michigan, which happened just last weekend. I did expect, we just finished the last session of General Conference, and they did not talk about the Michigan shooting as much as I thought they might. In fact, when Elder Bednar got up to the stand, I expected that would be one of the primary themes he would talk about. Now, looking back on it, I think that, these general conferences are not off the cuff. There's people who translate those into 100 languages, and they need basically the material already delivered to them. So if the prophet passes away, or if we have a terrible incident like the one in Grand Blanc, Michigan, the mechanisms, it would be very hard to turn the ship and have everybody rewriting their talks. So there's a feel, and maybe that's okay. It's a feeling of, let's move forward with the work of God. We can't dwell. I mean, it was definitely mentioned. It was definitely a part of people's prayers. So it was definitely a worthy topic for discussion. But I was a little bit embarrassed that I was not aware of the Lesotho disaster, the car crash that they talked about, where a young woman's organization experienced multiple fatalities in Africa. And I thought to myself, that's a pretty tragic incident. As far as actual death toll, much more tragic than the Michigan shooting. Not as dramatic, not as violent, perhaps not something that would make the headlines in an American newspaper, but it was something that the church definitely needed to be aware of just as much or more than the shooting that took place in Grand Blanc, Michigan. So it's interesting how our minds work as Americans, the way that we're trained by our news media, the stories that are important and the stories that don't make the headlines. So what were your feelings? But talking about the Grand Blanc thing, just because that was such a gut punch for Latter-day Saints, that our church was attacked in such a way where a truck, I mean, we all have stake centers, so we can all imagine a truck actually driving into the doors and then somebody getting out and spreading gasoline on the pews and lighting them on fire. We can all envision that because the architecture of LDS churches is pretty similar in most locations. So we can all visualize this, which only helps to enhance the horror of what we would experience if we were sitting there with our families and something like this took place. In the aftermath of that event, are there any lessons that the police or that the government can take that might prevent something like that from happening in the future?
No, not the police and government. Those two police officers that took him out were 30 seconds away from the time they were dispatched, which is a phenomenal response time.
Now, what we mean is it not necessarily 30 seconds after the shooting took place, but 30 seconds after the 911 call was made, the dispatch or the 911 caller communicated that to the police, and the dispatch then communicated to the police officers. After the information was communicated to the police officers, 30 seconds, and they were on the scene.
Phenomenal. And then the body cam footage is already out, and they went immediately, the way we train now, immediately to the sound of the gunfire and engaged the suspect and took him out.
Was the suspect inside the church or outside?
Looked like he was outside from what
I saw a clip of body cam, but it was like they did not let us see the exact body cam of the body going down. It was a body cam that showed a police officer who probably got in the fatal shot.
And he was standing outside, if I remember right.
Yeah, they were outside. So I don't know how this played it out.
Well, it's a terrible situation in that Latter-day Saints were service-oriented people. We're the first to stop at an accident, render aid, whatever. And I think that's what the congregants realized, that a vehicle had hit, and so they were going to go out and render aid, and were met with gunfire.
I see.
I think that the church will probably start putting more and more security measures in place. To what degree that'll be, I don't know.
What is the church policy with regard to concealed carry?
So we know that the church does not want weapons inside. However, if you look at the handbook, current...
The LDS Church Handbook.
Correct. But current law enforcement officers can. And when I go to the conference center and they have the magnetometers, I show my badge and creds to the missionaries. They summons church security, who I've worked a number of details with, joint details, and they go over my creds and lead me around the magnetometer.
If you find yourself at General Conference, you can defend the crowd.
That's what I would happily and proudly do.
Do you think that the church might change that policy in light of what happened?
It'll be interesting to see. I can't foresee them changing that too much in the near future.
What's your personal opinion?
My personal opinion is they'll probably go to the active members who are current law enforcement officers and maybe give them an assignment to actually help with the hide, flight, fight scenario should an attack happen. I think that would probably be the first thing they would try to utilize. That way they wouldn't have to change what's in the handbook.
Interesting.
That's just complete conjecture on my part, but I could see something like that taking place.
Well, in your opinion, should it be allowed that somebody with a concealed carry permit should be allowed to have their weapon in a sacrament meeting?
I know some that do, and I I don't encourage or discourage one way or the other. That's not my place.
Well, not every ward or, not every meeting is going to have active police officers in the congregation. So that would still leave, I would say, most wards vulnerable unless you allow concealed carry.
It'll be interesting to see what they do.
Sometimes a change in policy takes more than one disaster. More than one tragedy.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case. Yeah, it'll be interesting because I know some of these big mega churches hire armed security, and they've actually taken out the bad guys that have come in to do harm.
Well, those are the ones with 10,000 people in the congregation, like our general conference.
Church security, too, for talking about general conference and whatnot, church security is highly, highly trained individuals in both building security and dignitary and personal protection.
Well, in your opinion, how vulnerable? I know that there's lots of reports of break-ins and thefts, computer equipment and things of that nature in LDS meeting houses. Have you been involved in some of those cases?
Yes.
How vulnerable are churches? I mean, do they have to put in security cameras? I mean, how often, how prevalent is this?
It kind of goes in spates, at least up here in northern Utah. Sometimes you'll go for years, and then there's a month where it's happening kind of everywhere, where glass is getting kicked in. I think the church just quietly rebuilt, kind of like when the Singer Swap standoff was started by the dynamiting of our meeting center up there in Marion, Utah. That's what led to the Singer Swap standoff, which led to the shooting death of Officer Fred House.
Where did that take place?
That took place in the late 80s up in Summit County.
Okay, I do remember that then. Yeah, that would have been...
The church just quietly goes and rebuilds.
Right.
Kind of what we do.
With some of the cases that you've known about in different parts of the world where people break into LDS meeting houses, have they caught the suspects? Or is it mostly they just don't find any suspects? There's not that. You're not going to get a mother load of valuable equipment by robbing an LDS church house, but obviously there's enough motivation that maybe a computer or two is worth putting on, taking and trading it in.
Trouble, yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, I just we all hope that the experience in Grand Blanc, Michigan, and the experience with Charlie. It was just a terrible September for Latter-day Saints. There was a lot of bad stuff which occurred in that month that Latter-day Saints have dealt with, and it's prompted most Latter-day Saints to want to have their head on a swivel, especially in their church meetings and in other public events. They just recognize that we're dealing with a public mindset which is a little bit twisted right now in the United States. And as a result, it forces us to be more on our toes, which is unfortunate. All we want to do is spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. All we want to do is celebrate the doctrines of Jesus Christ. But here we are facing these particular challenges, and it's just something that we have to settle in for and be ready for.
We're watching so much prophecy being fulfilled right before our very eyes. You know, we taught in the Book of Mormon that Satan in our day will rage in the hearts of man and stir people up and have them make good look bad and bad look good.
Well, we see a lot of that, and many of us, every time there is such an instance, we think we're there. But I think in my mind, it can get a whole lot worse still. We're not exactly at the point that's been prophesied in the Book of Mormon and in other scriptures.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. All we can do is pray every morning that everything will be all right.
And that's a good practice. Well, Max, thank you for the opportunity of talking about some of these sensitive things. My channel, I generally just want to talk about doctrine, history. I want to talk about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. this relates. It's something that we're all dealing with, and it's all on our minds. And now, in a sense, I hope I can just get back to my normal, regularly scheduled programming and just talk about the things I love to talk about with the church. But I'm honored that you gave me this time and this opportunity, and hopefully an opportunity for some of the people who are going off on all these conspiracy theories. Maybe they can have a moment of sobriety and just wait, see how much evidence, be patient, right? See how much the general public is going to learn, how much the authorities information that they have, and then we can, if that doesn't satisfy, it seems like in this day and age, even that's not going to satisfy people. They like these things. They like the conspiracy theories. They like to believe that we've never gone to the moon. They like to believe that the earth might be flat. I mean, it's a strange time that we live in. My feeling is that a statement from the Savior that we're going to be in a period of wars and rumors of wars is not for lack of news. It's for too much news. So much news and so much information out there that we have a difficult time gleaning what's important and what's not important.
The light at the end of the tunnel is the Lord Jesus Christ. We just need to keep that first and foremost.
Thanks, Max. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your friendship.
It's been great to be with you tonight.
Thank you. Bye-bye.